When I walked into the house that night, I knew something was off. The air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing. I glanced around the room, and everything was just too perfect. It was close to 9 when I finally arrived home, and the drive felt longer than usual. Traffic was a nightmare on the way back from my late meeting at the office, rain pouring outside like the sky was in on my troubles. My Uber driver kept stealing glances at me in the rearview mirror, probably hoping for some small talk. I just stared out the window, lost in my thoughts. As I stepped inside, the light clicked on, revealing a tidy hallway that smelled of fresh citrus air freshener, oddly inviting but not quite right. "You're back," Sarah's voice floated in from the kitchen, devoid of excitement. Not a hint of joy, irritation, or even surprise. Just a statement. "Yeah, rough drive," I replied, maybe a bit too casually. I wanted to keep our conversation light, but there was a chill between us that I couldn't shake. "Should I reheat dinner?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and her lips were bare of lipstick, giving her an almost clinical vibe. I stared at her the way one might study strangers at the airport, trying to decipher their stories. "Nah, I ate something on the way," I lied, hoping to gauge her reaction. "How did it go today?" She seemed distracted. "The usual meetings, deadlines," she answered, her tone flat. But there was something else hidden in her eyes, something almost guarded. I could feel the distance between us growing, like a chasm I didn't know how to cross. She turned away, saying she'd let the kids know I was home. I stood there, slowly untying my shoes, and caught a glimpse of how everything felt off-kilter. The shoe rack was askew, the vase was positioned differently than I remembered, and even the family pictures on the wall felt a tad too polished, like they were hiding secrets. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. First, my daughter Emily appeared, followed by my son Max. "Dad." Emily called joyfully and rushed to hug me, but the moment felt rehearsed. "Are you staying for long?" Max asked, lingering on the stairs, his eyes searching mine. "I hope so," I said, locking eyes with him. His gaze was steady, too mature for his age, and I felt a twisting knot in my stomach. Later, as I wandered through the quiet house, I couldn't shake the feeling that it all looked too tidy, too perfect. The kitchen was spotless. No dishes in the sink, everything organized to the inch, while my favorite coffee mug sat lonely in the cabinet. And the fridge was stocked with perfectly labeled containers. Something about it felt wrong. In the dark of our bedroom, I noticed our bed was made tighter than a hotel S. The pillows were fluffed, and the comforter lay flat and pristine. I kicked off my shoes and sat there, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Sarah didn't come to check on me or say goodnight, and that felt odd. Hadn't it once been her instinct? As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, every creak of the house sounded louder, like a whisper of something unsettling. I was wide awake, restless. There was no jealousy. I had simply become an observer in my own life. The relationship that felt so right just months ago was disintegrating, one detail at a time. At 3 in the morning, I tiptoed to the kitchen for water. That's when I saw the notebook left open on the counter, revealing a list dated just last Thursday. Yoga, Friday, spa. Come to think of it, Sarah hadn't mentioned any self-care routines lately. My heart raced. Was she hiding something? Returning to the bedroom, I sat by the window, casting glances into the darkness, waiting for a light or any sign that things were as they once were. They were. Morning arrived like an unwelcome guest. "I put in a load of laundry," Sarah said, as if we were casual roommates instead of a married couple. Her back was turned to me, and I could see the silent distance between us growing like a shadow. "If you have clothes in your suitcase, just toss them in the basket." I could only nod, a knot of confusion twisting in my chest. As I brushed past her into the bathroom, my gut churned when I saw a women's towel hanging on the hook. My shaving brush was gone, replaced by a cheap disposable one. I felt sick. Why was everything so different? In the kitchen, she had already started breakfast, everything meticulously arranged, plates, napkins, fresh toast. I opened my mouth to ask, "What's going on?" But the words wouldn't come. "Want eggs?" she asked without looking at me. "Coffee's fine," I muttered, pouring myself a cup from the fancy new machine. "Where'd the coffee come from?" "Just a new variety," she replied casually, and that was the final straw. There was a layer of deceit wrapped between our conversations, as if she were speaking a different language. I felt like a stranger in my own home, and I was ready to find out just what was hiding beneath the surface. Something had to give. Little did I know, the truth was more horrifying than I ever imagined. It was time to confront the reality we were both avoiding. With a deep breath, I prepared to unravel the mystery that had turned my love into turmoil. Morning arrived like a bad hangover. "I did a load of laundry," Sarah said, casually tossing the words over her shoulder like we were just roommates instead of a married couple. Her back was turned to me, and I could feel the distance between us growing like a shadow. "If you've got stuff in your suitcase, just throw it in the basket." I nodded, confusion knotting my chest. As I walked into the bathroom, my gut sank when I spotted a woman's towel hanging on the hook. My shaving brush was gone, replaced by a cheap disposable one. I felt sick. Why was everything so different? In the kitchen, I found her already in the middle of breakfast, everything laid out meticulously, plates, napkins, fresh toast. I opened my mouth to ask, "What's going on?" But the words wouldn't come. "Want eggs?" she asked, still not looking at me. "Coffee's fine," I muttered, pouring myself a cup from the shiny new espresso machine. "Where's this coffee from?" "Just a new variety," she replied as if it was no big deal, and that was the last straw. There was a tension hanging between us, a veil of deceit that made it feel like we were speaking completely different languages. I felt like a stranger in my own home. It was clear I needed to dig deeper. Little did I know, the truth was more horrifying than I could ever imagine. It was time to confront the reality we were both avoiding. With a deep breath, I steeled myself to unravel the mystery that had turned my love life upside down. As I sat in the living room later that day, an unsettling weight had settled in my gut. Not wanting to believe anything was wrong, I picked up my phone and clicked through social media. But the second I saw a suspicious text pop up on her phone, my heart sprinted. I should have been the one holding that phone, not her. "Babe, we need to talk," I finally blurted out. The silence that followed was deafening. She looked at me, her expression carefully masked. "About what?" she asked, feigning innocence, but I could see the flicker of guilt behind her eyes. "About us," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "About you, and who's Igor?" Her face paled. "What do you mean?" "That guy you were texting, who's he? You've been acting strange. Don't pretend like everything's fine." There was a moment of silence before I pressed on. "Have you been hiding something from me?" The tension in the air felt electric. She dropped her gaze, and that told me everything. Something felt off, like that nagging intuition you can't shake off. When she finally spoke, those words cut deep. "Look, I thought you would trust me." Trust. That word felt so hollow right now. I watched her fumble for words, and for the first time I saw the cracks beneath her perfect facade. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I could barely focus on work, my mind racing with questions. I noticed the little signs, her late nights, the secretive phone calls, that new mysterious perfume that clung to her like a ghost. My friends had started to notice too. "Dude, are you doing okay?" Tyler asked one night at the bar. "You seem off, like something's eating at you." I chuckled bitterly. "Yeah, just my marriage." A heavy sadness settled on my shoulders as I replayed memories in my mind, the perfectly manicured lives we had built together, first dates, crazy road trips, the cozy nights in, all those moments that felt so real now twisted into bitter irony. Then came the night that shattered everything. While drowning my worries in cheap beer, I decided to do some digging. I couldn't help it. Something in me needed answers, and when I went through her texts, everything went dark. There was a message. A photo of Alina standing dangerously close to Igor. My chest felt tight as the truth hit me. I could barely breathe. I stormed out of the bar and straight to our condo. I had to confront her to finally get the answers I desperately needed. "Where were you last night?" I demanded the second she walked in. "Just out with friends," she replied too quickly, but I could feel the panic radiating off her. "Friends, is that what we're calling him?" I was livid, the betrayal seethed under my skin. "You don't understand." She shot back, but I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the fear, everything unraveling. With a shaky breath, I was ready to quit pretending everything was fine. I could feel the anger rising in my throat. "No, you don't get to play innocent. I've had enough. It's time you told me the truth." There was a long pause, and I watched as her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you." But what she said next shattered me. I thought I could juggle it all. I didn't mean to fall for him. But she had. The deeper I dug, the more layers of their betrayal piled up. I could feel the room spinning, like being in a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. With my heart racing, I had a choice to make: confront our shattered love or let it slip away. As she cried, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, a mix of heartbreak and resolve. This was it, time to decide the fate of our love. Little did she know, the truth had already set my heart free. I took a deep breath, preparing to speak words that could reshape our lives forever. "It's time to face what we've both been pretending isn't happening. I loved you once. But now?" And with that, everything changed. When I saw that text on his phone, my heart dropped. I didn't want to believe it could happen to me, not to us. I couldn't help but feel the air rush out of my lungs as I stood there, frozen, while Jake was busy in the kitchen. We had built a life together, and now Now it felt like everything was unraveling before my eyes. Taking a shaky breath, I could no longer pretend everything was fine. I could feel the rage boiling inside me, lingering at the back of my throat. No, you don't get to act innocent. I've had enough of this charade. Just tell me the truth. Silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. When I finally looked up, I saw her eyes glisten, brimming with tears. I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you. What came next hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought I could handle it all. I didn't mean to fall for him. But she had. Every detail I uncovered added more weight to the betrayal between us. My world twisted, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My heart raced. I had to decide, confront this broken love or let it fade away. As she cried, I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, a mix of heartbreak and resolve. This was it. It was time to define the future of our relationship. Little did she know, I already felt a sense of liberation in knowing the truth. I drew in a deep breath, assembling the words that could alter our lives. It's time to confront the reality we've both been dodging. I loved you once. But now, at that moment, everything changed. It all began when I checked her Instagram that night, scrolling through an old photo of us, happy, carefree, but something had shifted. The warning signs had been there, a late-night excuse, whispered phone calls, her suddenly being busy on weekends. Instead of finding comfort and love, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Late that night, I marched into the bedroom, determined to figure this mystery out. I found myself rummaging through her things, not for clues, but for understanding. How did I miss the signs? That's when I saw a pair of his shoes by the door. Not just any shoes, but the trendy sneakers I recognized from social media. Yeah, it was a shared bedroom, but now it felt like a foreign territory. I stumbled across a man's shirt, expensive, crisp, white, too big for Jake. A razor with fresh blades nestled in the bathroom, untouched. Everything screamed that someone else had invaded our space. The thought made my chest tighten with anxiety. Had she really believed she could juggle it all without me noticing? The next morning, I started digging deeper, grabbing coffee at Starbucks, nervously flipping through my thoughts. Desperate for clarity, I reached out to my friend Mark, a reliable lawyer specializing in family law. If it's straightforward, property division takes about 4 to 6 months, he told me over a quick bite. But if kids are involved, especially if she fights for custody, it can stretch longer, if you had evidence. I sat in tension, contemplating my next steps. Mark's words echoed in my mind. Gathering evidence would mean truly shattering our lives, but what else could I do? I needed her to see that the person she thought I was. Start collecting, I said, shaking off the apprehension. Keep it quiet. The plan sprang to life, surveillance on her friend. Tracking her bank statements, I had to see how deep this betrayal ran. That evening, I got home late after what felt like an eternity. The kids were already asleep, and there she sat, curled up in a blanket with a glass of wine. "Where have you been?" she asked, barely shifting her gaze from the book. "Just out with Mark," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Why? Is there a problem with that?" Her response was strangely dismissive. Rather than a protest, it was just a careless inquiry about my absence. That signaled something was off. I had a gut feeling she was juggling more than just schedules. It was like she was already choosing her side. "Do you think it's weird having someone else's stuff in our bathroom?" I probed, trying to gauge her reaction. A long pause hung in the air, like she was weighing her words carefully. "Maybe you're just being paranoid." The way she said it sounded defensive, but also detached. That night, sleep eluded me. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling. How could I lose control without even realizing it? How quietly someone could tiptoe into your life. No drama, no fanfare, just scents lingering in the air. The following morning, I woke up before my alarm, heart racing. The quiet house felt eerie. I crept into the nursery to check on the kids. Sophia was sprawled out, peaceful. Anton was unusually still, and I realized he might not be sleeping at all. I backed away quietly, heading to the kitchen. The coffee dripped slowly, and I gazed outside at the chilly dawn. Everything felt empty and devoid of warmth. Alyssa eventually emerged, newly bathed, hair still damp. The smell of her peach-scented shampoo used to comfort me, but now it just felt off. "Are you home all day?" she asked over her shoulder, washing her cup without even looking at me. "Yeah," I replied flatly. "Always." A silence stretched between us, but there was more rolling underneath the surface. As I drove the kids to school, everything felt heavy. Sophia animatedly chattered in the back, and I forced a smile, trying to find that sense of normalcy. But inside, my heart hummed with the inevitability of what I had to do. The moment had come to face the truth. I thought of Jake and everything that had fallen apart. These were all signs leading to a moment of reckoning. I just needed to figure out how to confront her without losing everything I still had left. The pause in the air was thick, and I could feel the weight of her words before she even spoke. Maybe you're just being paranoid. Alyssa's tone was defensive yet cold, like a wall was slowly rising between us. That night, sleep was nowhere to be found. I lay staring at the ceiling, caught in a web of thoughts that spun out of control. How had I let everything spiral so far without noticing? It was crazy how someone could slip into your life without any fanfare, just the faint scent of their perfume lingering behind. The next morning, I woke before my alarm went off, my heart racing frantically. The house felt more like a mausoleum than a home. I tiptoed into the nursery to check on our kids. Sophia was sprawled out in her crib, wrapped in a blanket, peaceful. But Anton was too still, and my heart sank as I wondered if he was even asleep. I quietly backed out, heading to the kitchen. As I poured coffee, the slow drip felt like an eternity. I gazed out at the dawn light, chilly and gray. It was like the world had lost its warmth. Just then, Alyssa shuffled in, hair still damp from her shower, fragrance of her peach-scented shampoo filling the air. It used to soothe me, but today it just felt wrong. "Are you home all day?" she asked, her back turned to me as she washed her cup. "Yeah," I replied, fighting to keep my tone neutral. "Always." There was a silence that felt more like a chasm, with unspoken words swirling between us. As I drove the kids to school, the weight of everything hung heavy. Sophia chattered away in the backseat, her innocence a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. I forced a smile, trying to recapture even a flicker of our normal life. But deep down, I knew what lay ahead, confronting Alyssa about the truth. Thinking of Jake and everything that had gone wrong in my life felt like a full-body ache. There were signs everywhere, leading me toward a reckoning I had to face. I just had to figure out how to confront Alyssa without shattering what little we had left. "Are you okay?" I finally asked, catching her off guard. "I'm fine," Sophia responded, her tiny voice breaking the tension. "What about your mom?" I pushed gently, my heart racing as I watched Anton's gaze drift toward the floor. Alyssa often vanished for long hours, always claiming work. Where does she go? I thought. And why does she come home dressed differently? I'd seen it, the way she'd slip through the door, coat still on, as if the world outside hadn't followed her in. That evening, Alyssa came home late, her key clicking in the door as if nothing had changed. I was sitting on the couch, buried in work. "You're home," she said, but her voice lacked any warmth. "And you're not. Where's the client? I thought you had a meeting," I replied, looking up from my report. She stood in the doorway, still wearing her coat, practically daring me to question her. "Take off your boots. You're tracking dirt in," I said, my frustration boiling beneath the surface. "Are you watching me?" She snapped, dropping her shoes by the door before retreating into the kitchen. "Have you had dinner?" She called out, voice strained. "With the kids, you haven't eaten with us in forever," I bit back. She came back empty-handed, just her phone in tow. "What are you trying to prove?" She shot back. "I'm not proving anything. I'm just recording watching behavior, noticing patterns," I replied, the tension palpable in the air. Something flickered in her eye, fear mixing with defiance but disappearing too quickly. "You're changing," she said quietly. "No, I'm just finally waking up," I countered, standing up and brushing past her, stopping short at the hallway. "Kids keep asking," I said, my heart pounding. "Why doesn't she sleep at home? Why does she smell like someone else?" But she turned away, avoiding my gaze. That night, I locked myself in our bedroom and fired up my laptop, stashing away incriminating evidence, photos, screenshots, and reports, just in case the storm hit. I braced myself for the moment when everything would change. A week later, Alyssa picked up the pace. On Sunday morning, she whipped up an elaborate breakfast: omelets, toast, freshly squeezed juice. The kitchen smelled of mint and melted butter. I walked in and froze, caught off guard. "Sit," she said, a smile playing on her lips, but it felt forced. "Do you want to go out of town?" She asked, voice light as if both of us weren't carrying the weight of secrets. "We used to love that." "Why?" I replied, my instincts kicking in. "Just for a change," she said, but I felt the words slip like sand through my fingers. It sounded rehearsed, as if extracted from the good old days that felt worlds away. "Do you really think I'm buying your act?" I asked bluntly. "I don't think you're buying anything," she said, her calm demeanor barely hiding the tension behind her eyes. As I cleaned up, she asked, "And what about the kids?" "Nothing, they don't need to know," I muttered, my heart racing. That afternoon, I met with my buddy Tyler, handing over a flash drive loaded with recordings. I had set up cameras outside our apartment, capturing Alyssa visiting Jake's place at odd hours, 8 trips in 3 weeks. Each time, the kids were nowhere in sight. "Do you think it's worth it to install one inside?" I asked. "Only if you want undeniable proof," Tyler said, eyeing me. I do, I shot back, but soon enough, nothing prepared me for what I'd find next. One day, Alyssa left her bag wide open in the hallway. Curiosity got the best of me and I peered inside. A white envelope caught my eye, a receipt for an engraved necklace. 3 days ago, no name listed. I slid it back in and closed the clasp, my heart racing. That night, she said, I got you something. Don't. You didn't buy it for me, I shot back. She froze, anger flashing in her eyes. You destroy everything yourself, I'm just not pretending anymore. As silence draped over the room, our conversations dwindled to nothing more than logistics. Take this, pick that up. Each day, the air got thicker, filled with unspoken words crushing down around us. One afternoon, I caught a whisper through the thin walls. Her voice, low and hushed, no, it's too soon. He's starting to suspect. If anything comes up, I'll just say you're a friend. Alarm bells went off in my head. I made a note of the time, planting seeds of doubt that only grew heavier in my chest. The next morning, I got intel from Victor. Jake had rented a new spot, shrouded in secrecy. The lease was under a fake name, cash only, and no identifying info on who stayed there. But the worst was yet to come. Over the next few weeks, I pieced together a reality that would shatter everything I thought I knew. The painful truth became crystal clear, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to handle it. My heart raced, everything was spiraling toward a confrontation that would change our lives forever. That night, she stared at me, her voice trembling slightly as she said, I got you something. Don't, I shot back, unable to hide the panic rising in my chest. You didn't buy it for me. She froze, fire flashing in her eyes. You ruin everything, you know that. I'm done pretending. An uneasy silence fell over the room, our conversations dwindling to robotic exchanges about logistics. Could you grab this? Don't forget that. Each day felt heavier, filled with unspoken words pressing down on us like a weight we couldn't lift. One afternoon, I overheard her speaking quietly through the thin walls of our condo. No, it's too soon. He's starting to suspect. If anything comes up, I'll just say you're one of my friends. My heart dropped like a lead weight. I noted the time, and with each sinking realization, doubt crowded my mind. The next morning, I met up with my buddy Noah, and he dropped a bomb. Jake had just rented a new place, hush hush. The lease was under a fake name, cash only, and there were no traces of whoever was staying there. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Over the next few weeks, I began piecing together a reality that shattered everything I thought I knew about our life together. The painful truth became painfully clear, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to face the storm brewing inside me. My heart raced, and I felt like everything was spiraling toward a confrontation that would change our lives forever. Inside, I felt a cold resolve building, not out of revenge, but out of the need to protect my kids, my future, everything that hadn't yet crumbled under the weight of this charade. I knew all too well that you could keep lying for a long time, but silence was more brutal than any lie. And I had been silent for too long. I returned home unexpectedly that afternoon. At work, I had texted my boss that I'd be late for a meeting, but I could tell my coworkers didn't care enough to question it. I was always the one who played it straight, never bringing drama to the office. I parked a block away from our condo and walked the rest of the way. The ground crunched beneath my feet, but I took it slow, because running could ruin everything I'd worked for. As I approached the door, I noticed a strange car parked in our driveway, a nondescript gray SUV with tinted windows. My gut churned. I committed the license plate number to memory. The door was unlocked when I pushed it open, just like always. It was quiet, no alarms, no footsteps echoing in the hallway. Just a warmth inside that felt wrong, like the heavy breath of a person lost in an afternoon nap. I slipped off my shoes and ventured further in. The kitchen was eerily silent. In the living room, the curtains were drawn tight and the TV was off. There was no sign of our kids or any sounds of life. I climbed the stairs slowly, and the creaks under my feet were almost deafening. At the end of the hall, the bedroom door was slightly ajar. I paused, listening. There was silence at first, then a voice, muffled but definitely not mine. Then I heard her voice, the same soft tone I'd only ever known to come out at night in the dark. I pushed the door open just a crack. Alyssa was lying back, hair a mess, her hand resting on a man's neck. He was bent over her, his shirt tossed carelessly on the floor. Tyler. Time froze. My heart raced. They both turned towards me, and for a moment, everything hung in the balance. Alyssa's eyes widened, processing the extent of the mess she was in. But I didn't need to count the number of secrets in that room. What are you doing? I finally found my voice, steady and cold. Tyler scrambled to get off her, inadvertently knocking over a lamp. The force of adrenaline surged through me, and before I knew it, I lunged at him, kicked him hard where it hurt most. I couldn't believe I had the strength, but it felt good. The high-pitched clang of adrenaline in my ears, I closed the door slowly, trying to regain my composure. Once outside, I slipped into my car where I quickly found the photo of the gray SUV and sent it to Noah with a simple note: "Find out who was driving this." He replied quickly, "I'll check it." I drove to an old apartment I had kept as a backup, a place I had called home before marriage. The scent of wood, old tobacco, and the quiet emptiness felt, for the first time in weeks, safe. I opened my laptop and stared at the file labeled Alyssa. It was time to create a new confirmation. I compiled everything I'd gathered over the past few weeks: photos, the incriminating screenshots, and videos from the camera situated near Tyler's old place. I messaged Noah, caught them together. "In the bedroom, we're starting." Alyssa called 3 hours later, but I didn't answer. Her messages poured in, filled with confusion and desperation. "You don't understand. It was a mistake. Don't do anything stupid." But I stayed silent, not because I didn't know what to say, but everything that needed to be said had already been said. Days later, Noah dropped another bomb. "The car was rented with fake documents. I got the security footage. I'll sync it with your timeline." So, I turned off my phone, set it beside me on the table, and closed my eyes. A profound emptiness settled over me, so deep I couldn't feel the anger anymore, only ashes where my heart used to be. The next morning, I returned home like nothing had changed. I stepped inside quietly, sans suitcase, without a sound. Alyssa wasn't in the kitchen as I expected. In our bedroom, the bed was made, and the scent of lavender filled the air, a stark contrast to the lemony, fresh smell I used to know. I headed downstairs and found a mug on the table, remnants of coffee still warm, meaning she must be nearby. Just then, I heard her footsteps, and Alyssa appeared in her pajamas, hair still damp from a shower. The surprise on her face was almost comical, if not infuriating. "You're back." "Yeah." I kept it flat cool. "I noticed changes." "Oh, you got it all wrong," she said, adjusting her robe slightly, a nervous habit. "It was a surprise about the kids. They're at school. I picked them up myself." "Thanks," I said, the tension thickening. She held herself a little tighter, almost instinctively. "I'll go get dressed. I need to hit the store. The fridge is empty." I nodded, waiting for her to disappear up the stairs. The moment the bedroom door clicked shut, I walked straight to the closet. I checked the bag she had taken with her on her last few trips. Inside were tissues, keys, a couple of receipts, and her perfume, but underneath it all, one condom. The others had been used, same brand as in the trash. I put everything back exactly as I found it. The next day, I let go of the housekeeper. I told her, "We don't need your services anymore." She protested, but I remained polite and precise, handing her severance without further explanation. Alyssa found out hours later. "Why didn't you involve me?" She glared, frustration etched across her face. "It's my decision," I replied, calm but firm. "She worked for us for 6 years, and now she's not." Knowing I was taking back control, I watched the irritation etch deeper into her expression, recognizing her leverage slipping further out of her grasp. I cut her access to our shared bank account, transferring all bills to my personal one without sending her a notification. I even applied for separate debit cards for the kids, just enough for what they needed, but under my terms. 3 days later, Alyssa stormed into the living room. "The card isn't working." The tension between us was electric, a quiet storm threatening everything around us. And as I faced her, I knew this was only the beginning of the reckoning that would unfold. She wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture that felt both instinctive and necessary as she looked at me. "I'll get dressed and run to the store. We're out of everything." I nodded, watching her retreat up the stairs, heart racing. As soon as her bedroom door clicked shut, I found myself drawn to the closet. Alyssa had just come back from a few trips, and I had a hunch about what I might find. Her weekend bag lay half open, and as I rummaged through it, I found tissues, her car keys, a couple of receipts, and her favorite perfume. And beneath it all, one condom. The others had been used, same brand as the one I pulled from the trash earlier. I quickly put everything back as if nothing had happened. The next day, I told our housekeeper, "We won't be needing your services anymore." She protested, but I remained calm and polite, handing over a severance check without giving her an explanation. Alyssa caught wind of it later. "Why would you do that without me?" Her anger was palpable, her frustration etched deep in her brow. "It's my call," I replied, my tone steady and unwavering. "She worked for us for 6 years, and now she's not." Seeing Alyssa's control start to slip sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. I followed that up by transferring our shared bank account into my name only, moving all bills to my personal account without so much as a heads up. I even applied for separate debit cards for our kids, enough for their needs, but only on my terms. 3 days later, Alyssa stormed into the living room, fire in her eyes. The card isn't working. The air crackled between us, tension thick enough to cut. And as I faced her, I knew this was just the beginning of a reckoning we couldn't avoid. I know what this means, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Are we really going to separate everything? Absolutely, I replied, feeling my heart hammer. I could almost see her resolve crumble. Her eyes flickered, and for a moment she said nothing. I could feel the weight of unsaid words hanging heavily in the air. Later that evening, I received a text from Victor, my hired investigator. A hidden camera had been installed, and though they hadn't gathered much yet, I knew it was only a matter of time. My heart raced at the thought of what was unfolding. Alyssa seemed to float through the house like a ghost. She was here but not really present, as if she were in a separate world. I spent 3 days at home, occupied with the kids in the morning, my laptop in the afternoons, and silence at night. I waited for her to slip up, to let her guard down. Then, on the 4th day, she left her phone unattended in the living room while she retreated to the bedroom with a magazine. I seized my chance. The password hadn't changed, a sign of her complacency. I scrolled through her texts and found a treasure trove of conversations with a guy named Jake, 3 months of flirty back and forths, dates, and plans that sent my blood boiling. It wasn't just chatting, it was a series of breadcrumbs leading straight to betrayal. Screenshots taken, evidence stored, I slid the phone back in its place. Alyssa never noticed, or maybe she chose to ignore it. That Friday night, she walked into my home office, standing at the door for a long moment before entering. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked finally, her voice flat. "About us," I replied, striking while the iron was hot. "We're done. Do you want a divorce?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with genuine curiosity. "Maybe," I said, holding my ground. She stood up slowly, almost defeated. "Go to bed," I told her. "Tomorrow is going to be hard." As she left, the door clicked shut quietly, yet somehow it felt thunderous. Back at my desk, I took stock of my life. Files of our marriage plagued my mind, lies, deceit, and a love gone awry. I was steady, certain of my next steps. The morning felt like a dream of emotions, an imitation of our shared life. Alyssa set the table with breakfast, coffee, eggs, freshly baked bread. Our kids came to the table in silence. Sophia yawned while Anton pushed his food around the plate. "I'll pick you up from school today," Alyssa announced, looking at the kids. "Daddy promised," Sophia piped up, catching her mother by surprise. That's when Alyssa froze, her facade slipping before she continued eating normally. After breakfast, she lingered in the living room as I worked, but then she approached me, her hands shoved in her pockets. "I need to talk to you," she said softly. "But without the kids around." "Go ahead," I replied, curiosity piqued. "I know things haven't been right for a while," she trailed off, her voice wavering. "Can we fix this? Are you referring to your relationship with Jake?" I shot back, feeling anger bubble. "I messed up. I was confused about who I was sleeping with. I don't want to lose what we have." I watched her, my heart no longer ready to play the game. "Do you want to save this family?" I asked. "Yes." Her voice trembled with urgency. "I don't trust words anymore. I'm past that." Her resolve cracked and she pushed forward, desperate for a hold. "Just give me time. I can fix this." "You had 2 years," I replied, anger simmering just below the surface. "I thought you understood." At that moment, the balance had shifted. Her options were gone. I returned to my work, dismissing her with cold finality. You can leave or stay, but the ending won't change." That evening, I received another text from Victor. They had gathered footage from the apartment. Solid evidence, dates matched, exchanges noted, all this visual proof ready to be handed over. It was too real. As I watched the clips, I felt something inside me harden. The images of her with Jake haunted me, and I felt as if I'd just swallowed glass. The next day, as Alyssa tried to speak again, I knew she'd hit the wall. "I thought we could start fresh," she said. "It's too late for that." Even without her confessing, her quiet realization stung. She understood the truth without a need for discussion. As day turned to night, I organized everything: our marriage contract, assets, kids' records, her messages, photos. Everything was set aside in its own folder, labeled neatly. I didn't touch her personal things or seek apologies. The truth was now in the actions we'd taken. Too much had been said without words, but it felt too late for change. Just before dawn, Alyssa entered my office without knocking, hair messy, wrapped in a robe. "Do you hate me?" she asked, eyes glistening. "No, then be a man and just forgive me." She moved closer. I can't live without you. Tears streamed down her cheeks silently, but I felt nothing. Go to bed, Alyssa. Tomorrow will be long. Once again, the door shut behind her, this time with finality. I remained seated, staring blankly at the screen in front of me. It was time for everything to come to light. I headed back to my parents' house, a small place outside the city where I grew up. Everything felt unchanged, the same old throw rug, the kettle that still whistled. But I wasn't that boy anymore. I had a storm brewing inside of me, and I was ready to face it head-on. As night fell, I meticulously organized everything: our separation papers, asset lists, the kids' documents, her messages, memories captured in photos, each neatly labeled in its own folder. I kept my distance from her personal items. I didn't need any apologies. The truth was clearer than ever. Our silence had spoken volumes, but it felt too late for any chance of change. Just before dawn, Alyssa slipped into my home office without a knock, her disheveled hair spilling out from under a cozy robe. "Do you hate me?" she asked, voice trembling, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "No, then just forgive me." She stepped closer, desperation etched across her face. "I can't imagine life without you." Tears streamed down her cheeks silently while I felt an unsettling emptiness inside. No warmth flickered in my heart. "Go to bed, Alyssa. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." As the door clicked shut behind her, it felt final this time. I stayed seated, staring blankly at my computer screen, bracing myself for the truth that was about to surface. I drove back to my parents' house, a modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of town where I'd spent my childhood. Everything felt unchanged, the same worn-out welcome mat, the kettle whistling, filling the air with memories. But I wasn't that kid anymore. The storm brewing inside me was ready to explode. Walking into the familiar living room, my mom noticed me instantly. "You don't look too good, honey," she said softly as she handed me a steaming cup of tea. "Just work stuff. Problems with Alyssa," I admitted, sinking into the creaky couch. She didn't pry, just sat down beside me, knowing I needed space. I stared out the window, watching the snowflakes dance in the glow of the streetlights. "I didn't want a medal," she finally said, breaking the silence, "but I've seen it for a while now." "How long has this been going on?" "A year, maybe longer, but why didn't you say something?" "It's not my place to break your heart," she answered, her gaze steady. Then it hit me like a freight train. I'd ignored the signs. Glaring texts popping up at odd hours, late nights at work, her phone locked tighter than a vault. I felt like an idiot. My mom reached for an old box labeled Family Memories. "I found something," she said. Inside were faded letters written in my dad's meticulous handwriting from 2 years before his passing. He suspected something. "He always thought Alyssa was up to no good," she added quietly. I flipped through the pages, feeling each word wash over me: dates, cryptic notes about a man named Mark frequently showing up in conversations. My heart raced. My dad knew, but he held back for fear of shattering my blissful ignorance. I had been so in love that I'd missed the signs. My mom revealed photos of their wedding day, Alyssa in a stunning white dress, my dad by her side, his expression full of concern. He never wanted me to marry her, not because he didn't love her, but because he saw the cracks I refused to acknowledge. When I finally returned to our condo that evening, I found Alyssa sitting in silence, the muted TV casting a dull glow over the room. An unopened novel lay on the coffee table, beside a nearly full glass of wine. "Where were you?" she asked, her tone sharper than I expected. "I was at my mom's." "Why?" I couldn't hold back. "Because I needed to think, and you've been acting different." "Different? And why do I feel like you're hiding something?" I passed her, storming into the home office. I flipped on the light to reveal a table full of documents I'd gathered, screenshots, financial records, and evidence. Everything meticulously laid out, dates and signatures in order. I sat there, staring at the cold, hard facts. No more doubt, I just needed to wait. An hour later, Alyssa knocked softly at the door. "Mikhail, it's too late, I'm done. I didn't want enemies, I just needed this to be over. Please, if you think this is just about feelings, you're wrong, it's about control. I wanted my independence," she said, her voice trembling. I couldn't even look at her. "Yeah, maybe it's not the same for you." She turned, anger radiating off her as she slammed the door behind her. As silence flooded the space, I felt the gravity of my decision settle in. I was ready to fight for our kids. The next morning, I filed the papers. I walked into the courthouse, heart racing, folder in hand, thick with copies, statements, and evidence. Clarity washed over me. I didn't feel relieved, just ready to take control. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, sharp and biting. I wasn't prepared for the call that came in just an hour later. Alyssa's voice was steady but had a strange tension. "Did you file the papers?" Yes, I replied, feeling colder inside than out. It was time. Michael, don't be unreasonable. We can talk this out like adults. Too late for that. You stopped explaining things the moment you decided to lie. Later that night, she showed up, tension palpable. You really want to drag this through court. There's a better way, she whispered, her voice shaking as she paced, fumbling with her phone. You don't get it. This isn't about pleasing you anymore, I shot back. I won't lose my kids. With that, something shifted. A crack appeared in her calm facade. What did you say? You think this makes you a real father? Maybe I'm doing this for the kids for once. The sound of the door closing echoed as she left, her frustration hanging in the air. Day by day, the walls began to close in. Court was looming, and the kids felt the strain. I noticed how quiet Anton became while Sophia started probing. Dad, did you and Mom have a fight? No, sweetheart. Sometimes adult choices lead us down different paths. She nodded slowly, processing everything. Things escalated when Alyssa tried to take the kids under the pretense of a doctor's appointment without my consent. I found out through an alert from their school she had not registered them as missing. Where are the kids? I barked when I finally got her on the phone. They're with me, she said casually. Where exactly, Alyssa? The tension was unbearable, and with the court date approaching, I knew this was only the beginning. But little did I know, everything was about to change. We're at the park, and it feels like everything's falling apart. You don't get to dictate to me, I said, frustration bubbling up inside me. Until this goes to court, I have every right to be with them. For a moment, the tension hung in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. I could hear the sound of cars passing by and the distant giggles of kids playing, a clear reminder my children weren't home. You need to bring them back within the hour, I warned, my voice low but firm, or I'm calling the cops. It felt like forever, but she finally showed up 40 minutes later. The kids looked lost and uneasy. My son, Ethan, glanced at me cautiously, like a deer caught in headlights. My daughter, Mia, didn't say a word, she just hurried past me. As she climbed the steps to leave, Alyssa shot back, Are you out of your mind? No, I replied sharply, I'm finally awake. Later that night, I met up with Victor at our usual diner. We huddled over coffee, our conversation heavy with strategy for the upcoming court hearing. I was anxious, the reality of our situation finally sinking in. Alyssa had hired a sharp lawyer, someone known for tearing families apart. She's going to pull every emotional trick in the book, Victor warned me, but you have to stay rational, don't get sucked into her theatrics. I agreed, knowing I had to stick to the facts. The next morning, the courthouse loomed in front of me, gray, modern, and cold. I arrived early, dressed in a crisp black coat, clutching my folder of evidence that felt heavier than it should have. Inside, people quietly shuffled about, the air thick with unspoken tension. Victor was waiting for me in the hallway, and we reviewed our documents one last time. Every detail needed to be perfect. There was no room for mistakes. A few minutes before the hearing began, Alyssa arrived, looking sharp in a tailored gray suit. I wanted to feel something, maybe anger or sadness, but all I felt was numb. She shot me one quick glance before turning away. The judge, a composed man in his 40s, called us to order and asked us to introduce ourselves. Victor outlined our case. Petition for divorce due to infidelity with evidence attached. We're seeking joint custody, but with the children primarily living with their father. Alyssa's lawyer stood up, and I could sense the storm brewing. We acknowledge there have been issues, she said smoothly, but we believe in the chance for reconciliation. Her defense, a desperate grasp at saving face. I waited, my heart pounding, until the judge turned to me. What's your stance on all this? He asked. Standing to face him, I spoke clearly. Since the beginning, my wife has deceived me. There have been multiple incidents where she was in contact with another man, including nights spent at his place. Over the last 2 years, I have records of shared expenses and documents that outline her betrayal. I've attempted to communicate, but she refused to be honest. I want to end this marriage. The judge nodded slowly, and I could feel Alyssa's glare digging into me. Then it happened. Her lawyer objected, claiming, We do not dispute the meetings but contest the context. The lawyer was fierce, but I stood firm, knowing the truth was on my side. Victor submitted our damning evidence, texts, videos, receipts. I noticed Alyssa's face pale as one particularly incriminating video flashed on screen. It was her exiting the apartment of the man she was seeing. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Ms. Anderson, is that you? The judge asked her. I watched as her confident facade began to crumble. I was misquoted, she stammered, but I knew there was no escape from the truth. As the judge inquired about child custody, I firmly stated, they should stay with me. Their lives, schooling, and routine should remain unchanged. If she's to be involved, it has to be court-ordered. Her eyes widened. You can't just take them from me. Without a shred of hesitation, I looked her straight in the eye. You took yourself out of their lives the moment you decided to cheat. Once outside the courtroom, the reality of what had just happened crashed over me like a wave. I walked over to Victor, prioritizing our next steps while Alyssa leaned against the wall, expression unreadable. Is this really it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a breath, ready to lay it all out. No, Alyssa, this is just the beginning. I'm protecting them from lies. I didn't think you had it in you, she murmured, her voice cracking. I saw the glimmer of vulnerability in her eyes for the first time in ages. I guess we both underestimated each other. But it was too late for us. Months passed, and the court ultimately sided with me. Our marriage was dissolved, and I was granted custody of our children. Alyssa could only see them a few times a month, and that had to be supervised. And as I adjusted to this new life, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning of a long road ahead, a road filled with healing and moving on. Once I stepped out of the courtroom, the weight of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. I strode over to Tyler, my mind racing about our next steps, while Alyssa leaned against the wall, her face a total blank. Is this really it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Taking a deep breath, I prepared to lay it all out. No, Alyssa, this is just the beginning. I'm protecting our kids from the lies. Her voice wavered, revealing a crack in her composure. I didn't think you had it in you. For the first time in way too long, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. I guess we both underestimated each other. But honestly, it was way too late for us. Months rolled on, and the court ultimately sided with me. Our marriage was officially over, and I got custody of our 2 kids. Alyssa could only see them a few times a month, and even then, it had to be supervised. As I settled into this new chapter of my life, that nagging feeling lingered, an inkling that this was just the beginning of a long journey ahead, filled with healing and moving on. Every financial claim was rejected, and our assets were split up according to the prenup. I left Alyssa the condo, where we hadn't really lived for ages since the divorce papers were filed. I didn't take everything from her, I just removed her ability to influence our lives. The condo became quieter, no underlying tension, just peace. Sophia, my daughter, started laughing again. Are we living together now, Dad? My son Anton asked one day at dinner. Yes, I replied, but Mom lives separately now. Forever. I wasn't sure if that was right, but it was the best choice for all of us. They took the news surprisingly well. It was as if the storm inside their heads had already passed long before the trial. I knew that deep down, the kids could feel the tension that had been brewing for a long time. The court ruling just made it official. Alyssa tried to reach out at first, calling every day for the first few weeks, then every other day, and eventually sending texts that read, I'm ready to start over, just tell me why. But there was nothing she could say to fix what had broken between us. The last message I received came after 43 days of silence, and it was just one word, sorry, but I didn't reply. Some doors, when slammed shut, become walls. One afternoon, she showed up at the kids' school, hiding by the entrance. I spotted her as I was picking Sophia and Anton up. She didn't approach, just stood there watching. Sophia saw her first and squeezed my hand. Daddy, Mom's there, are we going to her? No, buddy, we're going home, I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. I glanced back just in time to see Alyssa take a hesitant step forward, then falter, realizing that this wasn't a step toward us but into the unknown. After that day, I changed the locks, got a new security system, and even packed away the old family photos. Not out of bitterness, but to create a clean slate. Nothing should linger unspoken in our home, just clarity. I wasn't going to dwell in the past, not when I had finally accepted that our beautiful life had been unraveling for a long time. I just hadn't seen it. The kids adapted to our new rhythm, school, dinner, evening walks. I didn't pretend everything was perfect. I simply showed them life as it was, no sugarcoating. Will Mom ever come back? Sophia asked one night, her little voice filled with hope. Most likely not, I answered gently. Some people just don't know how to stick around when it truly matters. Alyssa faded from view, disconnected from everyone we knew. She vanished without a trace, old friends hadn't heard from her in months, and even my sister hadn't responded to my inquiries. I figured if someone truly wanted to disappear, they would. One evening, I found a letter in the mailbox, written in her handwriting. It was short, but it hit hard. You were right. I ruined everything. I thought I was in control, but in reality, I was losing everything. Thank you for protecting the kids and yourself. This is my last letter. I won't interfere anymore. It was signed simply, Alyssa. I looked out the window, then placed the letter back in the box without anger or sadness, just acceptance. The past wouldn't dictate my present. I could understand it, but it wouldn't justify my future. That evening, as Anton drifted off to sleep with his hand resting on my shoulder and Sophia read aloud, I listened closely, not just to the words of the story she chose, but to the softness and calmness in her voice. The anxiety was gone now. I realized the kids had emerged from this mess without being scarred, which meant all my sacrifices had been worth it. Some choices come not from emotion, but from silence. And in that silence, you truly learn who stands by your side and who you're better off leaving behind.